Welcome to Valor and Violence. November 25th, 1177, sunset. Somewhere between Montgisard and the Egyptian border, the most powerful Muslim commander in the world is riding a camel. Not his war horse. Not the magnificent Arabian stallion that carried him through a dozen victories. A camel. A pack animal. The kind of beast merchants use to haul dates and pottery across desert trade routes. Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria, the sword of Islam, is running for his life on a camel because it's faster than anything else left alive in his shattered army. His robes are torn, his face carries dust mixed with something darker, blood perhaps, or the residue of smoke from burning supply wagons. Behind him, the screaming has finally stopped. That's somehow worse than when it was happening. The silence means there's nobody left to scream. This morning, he commanded 26,000 warriors. Now, he can count the survivors on his fingers. Maybe both hands, if he's generous with the definition of survivor. 8 hours ago, his emirs were arguing about how to divide the conquered territories of Jerusalem, which palaces they would claim, which Christian noblewomen would become their wives. They were measuring drapes for rooms in a kingdom they hadn't captured yet. Now those same emirs are corpses rotting in Palestinian ravines, or they're running like Saladin, whipping exhausted animals toward Egypt and praying they reach the border before their luck runs out completely. Here's what you need to understand. This is not how wars are supposed to work. When you outnumber your enemy 52-1, you don't lose. When you command 8,000 elite Mamluk cavalry, warriors trained from childhood to be living weapons, you don't break. When you're Saladin, the man who united Egypt and Syria, who made the Crusader kingdoms tremble at the mention of your name, you don't flee on a camel, but he is fleeing, fast. So what happened? How does the greatest Muslim army assembled since the First Crusade simply cease to exist in an afternoon? How do 26,000 mounted warriors, the finest Islam can field, get annihilated by 500 Christian knights and some infantry who probably couldn't spell their own names? What catastrophic error did Saladin make? What did he miss? What single decision, taken in confidence just days ago, led to his entire world collapsing between dawn and dusk? And here's the question that will haunt Saladin for the rest of his life. How did a dying 16-year-old boy with bandaged hands and a face hidden behind a silver mask manage to outthink, outmaneuver, and outfight the most brilliant military mind in the Islamic world? Because that's what happened at Montgisard. Not a battle, a dissection. A systematic destruction of everything Saladin thought he knew about warfare. To understand how 20,000 Muslims died in 3 hours, we need to go back 72 hours. Back to when Saladin was still confident. Back to when victory seemed inevitable. Back to the moment when overconfidence became a weapon more deadly than any Crusader sword. November 22nd, 1177. Saladin's command tent near Ascalon. 3 days before the world changes. The war council is going well. Too well, perhaps. Though nobody notices that yet. 40 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers, Saladin sits on cushions surrounded by maps that show an empire stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Every fortress marked in red has fallen to him. Every green marker represents a Muslim victory. The map is mostly red now. Jerusalem sits there like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. His emirs are enthusiastic, which should be the first warning sign. When military commanders start agreeing with each other too easily, someone's not thinking hard enough. They're pointing at Jerusalem, calculating how many days until the walls fall. One emir suggests 4 days. Another laughs and says 3. Saladin allows himself a smile. Why shouldn't he? The mathematics of this campaign are absurdly favorable. 26,000 cavalry, 8,000 of them Mamluks, slave soldiers who've known nothing but warfare since they were children. Each Mamluk is worth 3 ordinary cavalrymen in combat. The chronicles say this. History proves it. His scouts report Jerusalem's garrison at fewer than 1,000 men. The kingdom's best fighters are scattered across distant fortresses, manning walls that won't save them. King Baldwin, that diseased child on the throne, can maybe scrape together 500 knights if he empties every castle between here and Damascus. The war chest holds enough gold to sustain this army for 6 months. The supply train stretches for miles. They've brought siege equipment, engineers, diplomats to negotiate surrender terms. Saladin isn't raiding, he's conquering. There's a difference. One of his commanders asks about Baldwin. Should they be concerned? The tent fills with laughter. Concerned about a 16-year-old leper? A boy so sick he can barely grip a sword? A king who needs to be carried on a litter because his legs don't work properly anymore? The same boy who hides his rotting face behind a silver mask because his own courtiers can't stand to look at him? Saladin, to his credit, doesn't laugh. He's fought Christians before. He knows they can be dangerous when desperate. But he's also fought the odds, and the odds are his religion right now. The boy is dying, Saladin says. God has already judged him. We're simply executing the sentence. Nobody in that tent considers for even a moment that the dying boy might have plans of his own. Cut to Jerusalem. Same night. Different mood entirely. Baldwin IV isn't sleeping, but then again, Baldwin never really sleeps anymore. Leprosy doesn't allow for restful nights. His body has become a prison that tightens a little more each day. His hands, wrapped in silk bandages, soaked with herbs that don't help, can barely hold a wine cup. His face, behind the mask he now wears constantly, has lost features his mother would recognize. He's alone in his chamber because even his most loyal servants struggle with proximity to a leper. Medieval minds see leprosy as God's punishment for sin. What sin could a child have committed to deserve this? Nobody asked that question out loud. The intelligence reports sit before him. Saladin is coming with 26,000 men. Jerusalem has 953 soldiers in garrison. Baldwin counted them personally. He counts everything personally now. When you're dying, you stop delegating the important things. His advisors spent 3 hours today begging him to flee. Sail to Cyprus. Live to fight another day. Let someone healthy defend the kingdom. All the reasonable arguments that reasonable men make when mathematics says you're dead. Baldwin said no. He's been saying no to reasonable arguments since he was 13, and they crowned him king despite the leprosy already visible on his skin. Here's what the chronicles from both sides agree on. Baldwin has a gift for warfare that shouldn't exist in someone so young and so sick. He sees terrain like a chess master sees the board. He understands logistics, morale, timing. At 16, he's already won battles he had no business surviving. But he's never faced anything like this. Nobody has. 52-1 odds don't get overcome through clever tactics. Those odds get overcome through miracles. And Baldwin stopped believing God was in the miracle business around the time his fingers went numb. Still, he's making calculations. Distance between Jerusalem and Saladin's position. March times. Weather patterns. The autumn rains that should have started but haven't. The terrain around Montgisard, which he's studied obsessively for years, because good kings know every battlefield in their kingdom. An idea is forming. Impossible. Suicidal. The kind of plan that gets you killed and your kingdom erased from history. But maybe if Saladin makes one mistake, just one, if the Sultan gets careless for even a moment, Baldwin starts writing orders. His bandaged hands make the ink smear, but the words are clear enough. Muster every night, empty the armories, prepare for a forced march. They're not waiting behind Jerusalem's walls for death to arrive. They're going hunting. November 23rd, dawn. The pieces are moving into position, but only one player sees the board clearly. Saladin's army bypasses Ascalon fortress without bothering to invest it. Why waste time on a siege when Jerusalem itself is undefended? The fortress garrison watches from their walls as 26,000 warriors flow past like a river of steel and horseflesh. They flow north. They flow toward what they think is certain victory. And this is where the geography starts to matter. This is where the trap begins to close. Except nobody realizes it's a trap yet. The land between Ascalon and Jerusalem is not flat. It looks flat from a distance, from a commander's perspective, from a war council, reviewing maps drawn by cartographers who've never actually walked the terrain. But Baldwin has walked it, ridden it, studied every wadi, every rise, every place where the ground does something unexpected. Around Montgisard, the landscape rolls. Gentle hills that don't look like obstacles until you're trying to maintain formation across them. Ravines that appear as simple shadows on maps but are deep enough to swallow horses. Rocky outcrops that channel movement into predictable paths. It's perfect cavalry country if you know what you're doing. It's a death trap if you don't. Saladin's vanguard spreads out. This is standard practice. When you have 26,000 men, you don't march them in a tight column. You'd need 3 days just to get everyone moving. So you spread. You forage. You let units move at their own pace across a front that stretches for miles. The discipline that held tight near Ascalon starts to relax. Why shouldn't it? They're in Christian territory? Yes, but Jerusalem's army is cowering behind city walls. The scouts report no enemy forces in the area. The sun is warm. The foraging is excellent. Villages are abandoned, their food stores left behind for the taking. By midday on November 23rd, Saladin's army isn't really an army anymore. It's a collection of units spread across 10 miles of Palestinian countryside, connected more by shared purpose than by any tactical coherence. One emir is 3 miles ahead with his cavalry, eager to be first to Jerusalem. Another is 2 miles behind, his men weighed down with plunder from Christian farms. The supply train has fallen even further back because wagons don't move at cavalry speed. The Mamluks, the elite corps, remain with Saladin in the center, but the center no longer has flanks to protect it. Muslim chroniclers later call this the first mistake. Christians call it arrogance. Modern military historians call it a textbook example of how overconfidence destroys cohesion. Nobody calls it what Baldwin calls it, an opportunity. Because while Saladin's army is spreading across the landscape like spilled wine, Baldwin's force is doing something nobody expects. They're marching, not toward Jerusalem, toward Montgisard, toward the scattered enemy, toward the one moment when mathematics might not matter as much as momentum. 45 miles in 36 hours. It's an insane pace. Knights in full armor, infantry carrying weapons and supplies, all moving at speeds that should break men and horses alike. Baldwin himself loses consciousness twice from the pain. His body's protest against movement that healthy men would find punishing. The Templars take turns carrying their king's litter when he can't stay mounted. 80 Templar knights, warrior monks who've taken vows never to retreat, never to show mercy to Islam's armies. They whisper prayers as they carry their dying king through the night. They wonder if they're marching to salvation or suicide. Probably both. November 24th. The weather does something crucial. The autumn rains that should have started weeks ago still haven't come. The ground stays firm. This matters more than anyone realizes. Firm ground means fast cavalry charges. Firm ground means horses won't bog down in mud. Firm ground means when violence comes, it comes quickly. Saladin's scouts miss Baldwin's force entirely. How? How do you miss 500 knights moving through your operating area? The answer is simple and damning. Saladin's scouts are looking in the wrong direction. They're watching the road from Jerusalem, expecting a defensive posture. They're not watching their flanks because why would they? Who would be stupid enough to attack them in open country? Baldwin reaches Montgisard by dawn on November 25th. His force is exhausted but positioned. The hills around them provide concealment. The ravines create natural kill zones. The rocky ground will channel any retreat into predictable paths. And Saladin's army is still scattered across 10 miles, still foraging, still confident, still completely unaware they're about to be hit in the worst possible position. Medieval warfare has rules. The larger army wins. The army with better position wins. The army that maintains cohesion wins. Saladin's force breaks all these rules simultaneously. They're larger but dispersed. They have better numbers but worse position. They have elite troops but no cohesion. Baldwin has studied these hills for years. He knows that if you hit an enemy here, right here at this exact spot, their natural instinct is to fall back south toward Egypt. But south means the ravines. South means the rocky ground where cavalry formations collapse. South means running into your own scattered units in confusion. It's not a battlefield. It's a killing floor. And Saladin has positioned his army on it without realizing. The sun rises on November 25th. It's clear and hot, unusual for late autumn. Visibility is perfect. The firm ground practically begs for cavalry action. Every tactical element favors rapid, decisive violence. Baldwin's scouts report the Muslim vanguard approaching Montgisard, still spread out, still confident, their advance elements singing victory songs about Jerusalem's imminent fall. The Templar Grand Master, Odo de Saint-Amand, brings his horse alongside Baldwin's. The king's silver mask reflects the morning sun. His bandaged hands grip the reins with strength that shouldn't exist in dying flesh. "Your Majesty," Odo says quietly. "This is madness. 500 against thousands. We should withdraw." Baldwin turns his masked face toward the approaching Muslim army. His voice, when it comes, is steady, clear, certain. "We withdraw, and Jerusalem falls by sunset. We attack, and God decides. I prefer God's judgment to mathematics." Then he does something that makes hardened Templars weep. He raises his bandaged hand toward heaven. The true cross, carried from Jerusalem's holiest church, is brought forward. The sight of their diseased king blessing his army with the holiest relic in Christendom breaks something in these warriors. They stop being men. They become weapons. And Saladin's scattered army, singing songs of victory, walks straight into the trap. 6:45 in the morning. The world is about to learn what desperation looks like when it wears armor. 3 perspectives, 3 truths, all happening in the same minute. His name is Ahmad ibn Khalil, though history won't remember it. 23 years old, trained since age 9 to be the finest light cavalry in the world. He's ridden with Saladin through Egypt, Syria, fought Christians a dozen times. He knows what Christian knights look like when they charge. He's seen it, survived it. This is different. He's riding point for his unit, maybe 200 yards ahead of the main Mamluk formation. The morning sun is behind him, warming his back. His horse is fresh, well fed from last night's foraging. He's thinking about Jerusalem, about the slave girl he'll buy with his share of plunder, about glory. Then the ground starts shaking. Not earthquake shaking, cavalry shaking. The rhythmic thunder of hundreds of hooves hitting firm earth in unison. But that's impossible. There's no Christian army within 20 miles. The scouts confirmed it yesterday. Jerusalem is defenseless. He turns his horse, squints into the sun. The hill to his north vomits knights, not charging down the slope. Erupting. 500 horsemen in full armor, lances lowered, moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible for men carrying 80 pounds of steel. They're not yelling. That's the detail that breaks him. Christian knights always yell when they charge. Battle cries, prayers, something. These knights are silent. Silent like death is silent. Ahmad has maybe 3 seconds to process what's happening. 3 seconds to realize his entire unit is about to die. 3 seconds to understand that someone made a terrible mistake and he's about to pay for it. He tries to wheel his horse, tries to run, tries to warn the others. The lance takes him through the chest before he completes the turn. He's dead before he hits the ground. The horse that tramples him doesn't even slow down. Brother Matthias has been waiting for this moment his entire life. Not the charge. Any knight can charge. He's waiting for the moment when faith becomes visible, when doubt dies and certainty takes its place, when you stop being a man trying to believe and become belief itself. The moment is now. Baldwin gave the signal 30 seconds ago. One raised hand, bandaged fingers forming a fist against the morning sky. No trumpets, no dramatic speeches, just that fist and then the descent of the hill. Matthias's horse is under him, powerful and trained for this exact motion. His lance is level, locked against his side, the weight of it balanced perfectly. His shield protects his left. His vision narrows to the tunnel ahead, to the Muslim cavalry that hasn't seen them yet, that's still singing victory songs. The Mamluk scout dies on someone else's lance. Matthias doesn't care whose. Target, fixation. That's the Templar way. Pick your target. Commit to impact. Trust God to sort the rest. His target is an officer. Has to be, from the quality of the armor. The man is turning, mouth opening, probably to shout a warning. He'll never finish that shout. Impact. The lance shatters against the Mamluk's chest plate, but momentum carries Matthias through. His horse's shoulder catches the Muslim's mount, sends it sprawling. Matthias draws his sword without conscious thought. The blade comes down once, twice, 3 times. Blood on steel, blood on ground. Blood everywhere. But Matthias isn't seeing blood. He's seeing vindication. Every prayer, every vow, every moment of doubt about whether God really favored their cause. All answered in this single moment of righteous violence. The Mamluks are breaking. Already. Elite cavalry, trained from childhood, breaking before the charge even completes. Because they weren't ready. Because they never imagined Christians would be stupid enough to attack. Because 500 men who believe they're God's instruments of judgment are more terrifying than 26,000 men who think they've already won. Matthias doesn't think this. He knows it, feels it in his bones. His sword rises and falls. Each swing is a prayer. Each kill is an amen. He can't feel his hands. That's probably a blessing right now. Baldwin watches the charge from 50 yards back, positioned where he can see the whole field. He's not supposed to be this close. His bodyguards wanted him a mile back, safe, commanding from distance like proper kings do. But Baldwin needs to see this, needs to watch his insane gamble either work or fail, needs to know in real time whether God is listening or whether he just killed 500 men for nothing. The first impact. The Muslim scout formation disintegrates. Not retreats, disintegrates. There's a difference. Retreat implies order, discipline, a controlled withdrawal. Disintegration is when trained warriors suddenly remember they're mortal and decide mortality is somewhere else. The Mamluks behind the scouts are trying to form up, trying to respond, but they're not ready. You can't form cavalry lines when your vanguard is dying 50 yards in front of you. You can't maintain discipline when knights are already among your ranks, killing with methodical efficiency. Baldwin sees the moment. The precise instant when confidence becomes confusion. When the Mamluk commander realizes his force is cut off from the main army. When experienced warriors understand they're outnumbered locally, even though globally they have numerical superiority. It's working. The trap is working. But this is only the first formation. Maybe 800 Mamluks. Saladin has 8,000 total. And behind them, thousands more cavalry spread across miles of countryside. Baldwin's hands are shaking inside the bandages. Pain or anticipation or terror, he can't tell anymore. His mind is calculating. The Mamluks will send riders to warn Saladin. Those riders will reach the main force in maybe 15 minutes. Then Saladin will respond with overwhelming numbers. Then the mathematics reasserts itself and 500 become corpses. Unless Baldwin can create panic faster than Saladin can create order. Unless the psychological cascade happens quickly enough that training and discipline don't matter. Unless terror spreads like plague through an army that woke up confident and now has to confront the possibility that God isn't on their side after all. It's a race now. Panic versus discipline. Faith versus mathematics. A dying boy's insane vision versus the greatest Muslim military mind of the age. The morning sun climbs higher. The screaming starts. The real battle is just beginning. And somewhere, miles south, Saladin still doesn't know his army is dying. 7:15 in the morning. Panic has a speed. Today, it moves faster than horses. The riders who escaped the first slaughter reach Saladin's main force within 12 minutes. They're not riding in formation. They're not delivering coherent reports. They're fleeing. And fleeing men tell stories that don't make sense. Christians, one gasps. Thousands of them. There aren't thousands. There are 500. But terror multiplies numbers. When you're running for your life, 500 knights feel like an army. Saladin's initial response is textbook perfect. He's dealt with Christian raids before. He orders his Mamluks into formation. He sends messengers to recall the scattered vanguard. He begins the mechanical process of concentrating his dispersed force into a cohesive fighting unit. But cohesion requires time. And time is the one thing Baldwin won't give him, because the Templars aren't stopping. They're not consolidating after the first victory. They're not pausing to regroup. They're pursuing, chasing the fleeing Mamluks directly into the next Muslim formation, bringing chaos with them like a contagion. This is where medieval warfare breaks its own rules. Cavalry charges are supposed to be discrete events. You charge, you impact, you withdraw to reform, you charge again. Structured, controlled, predictable. Baldwin's knights aren't withdrawing, they're flowing, one target to the next. using the fleeing Muslims as guides to find the next formation, turning Saladin's own army into a map of where to kill next. The second Mamluk formation has maybe 90 seconds of warning. 90 seconds to see their comrades running toward them with Christian knights in pursuit. Not enough time to form proper lines. Not enough time to understand what's happening. Just enough time to feel fear take root. They break on contact. Not all of them. The officers hold. Maybe 200 Mamluks. Stand their ground. Fight with the skill their training promised. They kill Crusaders. The Christian casualties are mounting. But the rest, the majority, they're calculating odds in real time. They're watching elite warriors die. They're hearing screams. They're thinking about the 26,000 men they started with this morning and wondering where all those men are right now. And they're running. By 7:30, 3 Mamluk formations have collapsed. That's roughly 2,000 cavalry, either dead or fleeing. The psychological math starts shifting. Muslim warriors who haven't even seen the enemy yet are hearing the screams. They're watching their own men run past them. They're being told Christians are everywhere, in impossible numbers, killing with supernatural efficiency. Saladin himself finally sees the enemy at 7:45. He's positioned on a low rise, trying to rally his center. And what he sees breaks something in his understanding of warfare. 500 knights. That's all. 500 men, many of them clearly wounded now, their white surcoats stained red. They should be exhausted. They charged uphill initially. They've been in continuous combat for an hour. Their horses should be blown. But they're not stopping, and behind them, infantry is arriving. Christian foot soldiers moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible. They're not joining the cavalry fight. They're blocking retreat routes, sealing ravines, turning the battlefield into a box with only one exit, south through the broken ground Baldwin chose specifically for this purpose. Saladin orders a countercharge. His personal Mamluk guard, 1,000 of the finest warriors in Islam, men who've never broken, men who've charged into Crusader fortress walls and survived. They form up, they charge, and they meet Templars who aren't men anymore. There's something else, something that doesn't feel pain or fear or fatigue, something that sees death approaching and rides toward it with religious certainty. The Mamluk guard doesn't break, but they don't break through either. The charge stalls, becomes a melee, becomes a grinding slaughter where skill matters less than willingness to die. And that's when the cascade becomes unstoppable. Because other Muslim formations, watching the elite guard, fail to break 500 Christians, make a calculation. If the best can't win, what chance do the rest have? If Saladin's personal bodyguard is dying in front of them, what does that say about divine favor? The rout begins. Not from cowardice, from mathematics, from logic, from the same rational thinking that said 26,000 should beat 500. Now that logic says run, live to fight another day. This battle is lost. Save yourself. Thousands of cavalry turn south, toward Egypt, toward safety. Directly into the ravines and broken ground Baldwin prepared for them. The killing becomes industrial. Templars and Christian knights aren't chasing individuals anymore. They're herding, driving panicked Muslims into natural death traps where horses stumble, formations collapse, and men die not from wounds but from being crushed by their own comrades. The ravines fill with bodies. Not corpses yet. Living men, wounded men, trapped under horses and other soldiers. They suffocate. They're trampled by the next wave of fleeing Muslims who don't see them until it's too late. By 9 in the morning, Saladin's army has ceased to exist as a coherent force. It's 26,000 individuals running in the same general direction, unified only by terror. Saladin himself is still trying to rally units, still giving orders, still believing that discipline can overcome panic. His emirs are begging him to flee. He refuses. He's Saladin. He doesn't flee from Christians. He doesn't abandon armies. Then a Templar wedge breaks through his bodyguard, gets within 50 yards of the Sultan himself, and suddenly the mathematics become personal. Stay and die, or live and rebuild. Someone brings him a camel, the fastest animal available, not a warhorse, not the mount a sultan should ride. A camel, a merchant's beast, a symbol of everything this day has become. Saladin mounts the camel, turns south, and runs. Behind him, 20,000 Muslims are dying. The Battle of Montgisard is entering its final, bloodiest phase. Baldwin's impossible gamble has become an impossible victory. By sunset on November 25th, the counting begins. Not of victories, of failures. 20,000 Muslim dead. The number appears in chronicles from both sides, Christian and Muslim sources agreeing on the scale even when they disagree on the reasons. 20,000 corpses spread across ravines and hills around Montgisard. Bodies stacked so deep in some gullies that Crusader horses refuse to cross them. The smell will linger for months. Saladin reaches Cairo with fewer than 2,000 survivors from his 26,000. The greatest Muslim army assembled in a generation has been reduced to a remnant that limps home on exhausted animals. His racing camel saved his life but destroyed something more valuable than life: his reputation. In the Islamic world, news of Montgisard spreads like disease. How does this happen? How does Saladin, who united Egypt and Syria, who made Crusader kingdoms tremble, lose to a dying child? The explanations fracture along theological lines. Some call it divine punishment for Saladin's arrogance. Others blame the commanders who let the army disperse. A few, the most honest, admit the truth. They were outthought, outmaneuvered, and outfought by a 16-year-old leper who understood something they didn't. That terror travels faster than orders. That morale matters more than mathematics. That confidence becomes weakness when it blinds you to danger. The Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athir, usually careful to present Islamic victories favorably, can't hide the disaster. He writes that Montgisard was the most terrible catastrophe to befall Islam in this age. Another chronicler is more blunt. God turned his face from us that day. But here's the autopsy's real finding. This wasn't one mistake. It was a cascade. Saladin dispersed his army because he was confident. He ignored scout reports because he was confident. He didn't expect attack because confidence told him Baldwin would cower behind walls. Each decision, reasonable in isolation, became lethal in combination. Military historians call it the tyranny of assumptions. Saladin assumed the larger force wins. He assumed elite troops guarantee victory. He assumed a dying enemy wouldn't attack. All true, usually. Fatal, today. Baldwin understood something older than tactics. That battles are fought in minds before they're fought on fields. That if you can break an enemy's certainty about inevitable victory, you can break the enemy. The 500 knights didn't defeat 26,000 warriors. They defeated 26,000 warriors who suddenly doubted. The material gains for Jerusalem are staggering. Saladin's war chest, meant to fund 6 months of campaigning, becomes Crusader property. Enough weapons to equip every Christian fortress in the Levant. Thousands of horses. The bankrupt kingdom of Jerusalem becomes solvent in an afternoon. More importantly, they buy time. 10 years. Saladin will rebuild his army, but he'll rebuild it cautiously. The man who swept all before him now approaches Crusader kingdoms with respect born from trauma. He'll never again assume victory before the battle begins. But the real tragedy is just beginning. Baldwin lives 8 more years, each one a medical impossibility, each one a masterclass in ruling while dying. By the end, he's blind, can't walk, can barely speak. But his mind remains sharp until the final days. Even Saladin, when asked years later what he feared most, reportedly said, "That man, more than any army." Baldwin dies in 1185, age 24, his body finally giving up the fight it should have lost at 13. 2 years later, Saladin reconquers Jerusalem. 2 years. That's how long the kingdom survives without the leper king's genius holding it together. All the fortresses Baldwin saved, all the wealth he captured, all the time he bought, gone. The kingdom he bled for, suffered for, died slowly for, crumbles without him. The bitter irony cuts deep. Baldwin achieved the impossible at Montgisard. He proved that faith and intelligence could overcome any odds. He saved Christian civilization in the Holy Land with 500 knights and a desperate gamble. And it didn't matter, because great leaders, create moments that outlast them only if they create systems that survive them. Baldwin created victories, not successors. The kingdom fell not because he failed, but because no one could replace him. Montgisard stands in history as the greatest upset in medieval warfare. 52 to 1 odds overcome through tactical brilliance and psychological warfare. The moment when everything military theory said was impossible became reality. But it also stands as proof that even impossible victories can't change inevitable endings. Demographics still mattered. Geography still mattered. The Islamic world was larger, wealthier, more populous. One brilliant king could hold back that tide for a decade. But tides don't stop for individuals, no matter how brilliant. Saladin learned from Montgisard. He never made the same mistakes again. He rebuilt carefully, attacked methodically, won slowly but certainly. Baldwin taught Saladin how to beat the Crusaders, then died and let Saladin implement the lesson. That's the final autopsy finding, the one historians argue about in quiet moments. Did Baldwin save the kingdom of Jerusalem, or merely postpone its execution? Did those 500 knights change history, or just delay it? The corpses at Montgisard can't answer. Neither can the sultan who fled on a camel, or the king who died in agony 8 years later. But the question haunts us still. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you commanded 26,000 warriors and faced 500, would you see the trap before it closed? Or would confidence blind you the way it blinded Saladin? Because Montgisard wasn't just a medieval battle. It's a pattern that repeats. Overconfidence destroys armies. Desperation creates miracles. And sometimes the dying boy with bandaged hands sees what the mighty sultan misses. If you want more stories where the impossible becomes reality, where the mathematics say death but history says otherwise, hit subscribe. We're diving deep into battles that shouldn't have happened the way they did. Next time, we're examining how 300 defenders held a fortress against 30,000 for 6 months. The siege historians call mathematically impossible. Until then, remember what Baldwin taught us. Numbers don't win battles. Certainty does. And the moment you're certain you've won is the moment you're most vulnerable. Welcome to Valor and Violence, where we dissect the defeats that changed history.